Hello everyone, welcome to Walk the Talk with Sourabh Sisodiya. And let me tell you, with today's podcast, we are going international. And one quote that comes in mind when I look at the journey of our today's guest is, before you become an overnight success, you need to be an everyday hustler. Yes, she has a career spanning 3 decades and has worked for 30 years relentlessly before becoming an overnight success. So I'm talking about Margaret Franklin, CEO, CFA Institute. Thank you, Marg, for taking out time for this. It's my pleasure to have you on the show and looking forward to have some fun and candid conversation with you today.
Great. I'm looking forward to it just as much as you are.
Thank you. Many of you all will be amazed to know that Marg did not clear the CFA Level 1 exam in the very first attempt. And now she's heading the institute as the CEO. That's quite an inspiring journey. And I'm sure in this 30 years long career, there will be many ups and downs. So I want to know more about this journey, how the ups and downs have been, and I want to hear from you.
So I had actually been working for a number of years before I got into the industry, and I got in quite by accident. I was working for a media company, and they had suggested there was a job over at State Street Global Advisors back in 1992, and then I took the job. I didn't know the difference between a stock and a bond, and so I wrote my Canadian securities course, and then I realized the business was super interesting. It had a mix of obviously math, economics, politics, history, what we now know as behavioral finance. And so I committed to it, and everybody around me had a CFA charter who was really good. So I decided to pursue my charter. And you're right, I did not get my first level on the first go round.
That's great, but now from not being able to clear on the very first attempt and being the CEO of CFA Institute, that itself speaks a lot. And I'm sure all those who are watching will take motivation from that you shouldn't look at your obstacles and you should keep moving forward. So that's a great journey. You have been in the industry for 30 years. What is one important leadership lesson that you have learned and how it has proved invaluable?
So I think there are several things that I've learned along the way, and some of them are obvious, and other leaders would say, and some are maybe not quite so obvious. So the first is always to do a good job, right? Remember who your client is, and always keep that sort of in your sights, making sure that you're doing a really good job and doing it in the right way. Reputations are built up over time, and that is, I think, what you call the everyday effort that goes into it. But ultimately, reputations can be destroyed in a moment, and so I think always to have that long-term reputation, because it's the most valuable currency you have. The second thing is conscientiousness really matters. I think all the details and being very conscientious about your work really matters. I think earlier in my career, I can now see that I made my job easier for my bosses, so that made them appreciate what I do more. So that was a good lesson. And then finally, I think leadership always has been, but even more so now, is about followership, and that it is about making your teams better, creating pathways for them to succeed, and if most people succeed, then you will be very successful. And I find that in a global role to be one of the most interesting aspects of it, and certainly one of the most rewarding, is while the core principles are pretty similar around the world, how they get expressed in each market is different. And we've just come from a meeting with our CFA Society India Board of Directors, and it is just the color and details of the individual markets are important. And certainly in India, it's a very important market for us.
That's great. And if I have to summarize, I would say winners are ordinary people with extraordinary efforts. So I would say your journey is like you have showed up every day and you have reached this level because of your extraordinary efforts. Now coming to, there's a lot of gender disparity when it comes to the investment industry. There aren't many women CEOs, you being one of the outliers. So what's your take on that, and how is the CFA charter helping women climb the finance ranks?
So I think the industry suffers from an impression that may not have been attractive to women, and I think increasingly that's changing. So, what I have found has kept me for 3 decades wildly interested in what I do, and I can see, the years ahead. I haven't lost any of my enthusiasm for it, is the purpose and nobility of the work, right? That is that people save up money and then they have others manage it for them. There are all parts of the system that create that into further value. So there's real nobility in that. I think that the way we explain and describe the business doesn't come across particularly clearly. Last night, we were at the launch for the career guide that CFA Institute and CFA Society India have done. And so for any of your viewers and listeners on this, I would encourage you to get your hands on the career guide, because it describes very simply, but with great detail, exactly what the different roles in the industry are. And I think it will really help people understand what the opportunities and the thrilling parts are, and actually what the day-to-day stuff is. So women actually haven't normally participated, and part of it is, for any job, if you can't see it, you can't imagine it. So visibility is validity, and as we increasingly have more women in the most senior roles of leadership and shaping the industry and companies, more women will begin to see that. We, over the last couple of days, have had a number of initiatives and forums where it is very senior women here in India talking about the unique opportunities and challenges. And then, as I said, we just came out of our board meetings with the CFA Society India, and it's clear that there is a commitment from the entire team to really try and tackle the gender diversity issue. We do know that diverse teams produce better results. And why is that? You have different experiences, different perspectives, different ways of tackling and thinking about both the opportunities and the challenges. And it's easy to have a homogenous group, but it doesn't produce the best results. And I'm a highly practical and competitive person. I want to make sure that we can produce the best things, do the best we can, and most of that revolves around having and building diverse teams and then capitalizing on it.
Great, that's quite a detailed answer. And as Marg mentioned, that career guide is something you should definitely look forward. I read it last night, and I think there were a lot of opportunities which are open, and many people aren't aware about that. And all the women watching out this, I think you should take inspiration from her, how she has progressed in her entire career. So that's great, Marg. Now coming to ESG, there's a lot of talk about ESG investings, and a lot of companies are moving towards that. So as an investment professional, what's your take on that, and what should we do to make it more attractive to other investors?
So I think ESG actually, which is environmental, social, and governance aspects for looking at investments differently, has become an extraordinarily interesting part of our business. So if you think about what we do, we allocate capital to investment opportunities. And, increasingly those investments have an impact more broadly on society. I would say the most urgent of those files is actually climate. And there's not a part of the world, and particularly in this last year, that isn't experiencing some of the effects of climate change. So it's urgent. It has science behind it. It has the math that the investment industry can really tackle these things. And it creates an exciting opportunity because, active management, those things where the markets are a bit inefficient, you can actually create great returns. What I have noticed, I've been in Asia for the last 2 weeks, and I've done, over the last 8 weeks, been in all parts of the world. And what I think really about Asia that is so exciting and different from the other markets is this real return-seeking opportunities. And that is, I think, a combination of a much younger population, real embracing of digital and technology as disruptors, great startup context, and I think that mindset is very different here than in other parts of the world. So I think actually where we're going to be able to solve things like water scarcity and security, food security and agriculture, all of those innovative technologies that are not just to create a financial return, but also very much about solving some of the greatest challenges and creating some of the greatest opportunities that the world probably has had in a long time is incredibly exciting and with great purpose.
Yes, I agree with you that ethical investing is the need of the hour. And you mentioned about technology disruption. And technology has a long history of disrupting our industry with the advent of algorithmic trading, machine learning, AI. How do you think it will affect our industry and what's the way going forward?
Yeah. So I think artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, big data are increasingly becoming important features of portfolio management, decision making. I think there is a fear out there that it'll disrupt all of us as human beings. And really what we see is it's the combination of artificial intelligence and all the things that go with it and human intelligence. And particularly here in India, as we see a growing retail market with significant assets and significant growth trajectory over the coming decades. At the end of the day, data, AI, technology can help create transparency, can help create reliability, greater opportunities to employ that into your strategies, but at the end of the day, you still need human interaction. So I think the jobs that we have right now will change materially, and there will be new jobs around the corner. So there's always a need for continuous learning, and technology accelerates that.
So you mentioned about continuous learning and jobs will change in the future. So what is the CFA Institute's plan to incorporate any new changes? Where do you see yourself, CFA Institute, going 5 years from today? Like any changes you wish to incorporate in the curriculum?
So I think there are a number of changes that we are looking at, and the principal premise is to make the best professionals that we can that occupy the business from career entry all the way through the lifespan of their career. So obviously the CFA program is the foundational one. We continue to evolve it to meet the needs of employers, what they need for that early career entrant, whether that be our content, how we're actually structuring the program, and you'll hear over the coming months elements of creating practical modules that make candidates more job ready. We do know that 1 in 2 jobs will be materially different in the next 5 years. We know that 1 in 3 jobs that exist now will disappear. And so a lot of our efforts really are around making sure that we have the professional learning strategies and the portfolio that will meet the needs of investment professionals. So a really good example, which we talked about earlier, is ESG. That wasn't even a thing 15 years ago. So whether you're a career entrant or a veteran in the business, actually making sure that you have those skills to incorporate critically important. The other thing we think about is what are the skills you need from a job perspective. So making sure we have the future financial talent and that there's job readiness. And I think increasingly we'll be spending a lot of time building out those strategies and offerings for our candidates and members.
Great. So Marg mentioned about being future ready, and I being CFA myself, I can tell you that CFA itself has brought a lot of changes in my life. There's a lot of respect wherever I go. If I am a CFA, so I come on TV, and like if I tell them that I am a CFA, they're like, oh, you are a CFA. So I can totally agree with her that the way CFA is changing with the ever-changing industry, that's a great thing. And those aspiring CFA charter holders, you should definitely, if you want to go into finance, CFA is one of the best degree to have.
I agree.
What one piece of advice you would like to give the audience, those who are watching it, or any new CFA charter holder or any financial professional, that what should be, because you have a career which is 30 years plus. So one advice that, okay, if you are going into finance, this is something you should definitely know. Any words of wisdom from you?
So I think table stakes are that you have to be well educated, right? You have to know your stuff, and you'll always need to keep learning because the markets are dynamic, technology is disruptive, clients are changing, the actual composition of our clients is changing, particularly as we see more retail, greater financial inclusion. So there's a real dynamism to the market. But the one thing that actually matters most is that ethical orientation. And that is the thing that differentiates you from everybody else. And an ethical orientation has, I think, a collateral impact, and that is to have you thinking differently about the whole ecosystem. But at the end of the day, personal reputation is what matters most, and that is always keeping your client's interests ahead of your own, making sure that what you're doing is done in an ethical manner. And CFA Institute really provides the tools, the learnings, and the framework for people to operate in that system.
That's great. So basically, ethics before anything. As they say, we become the books we read. And I want to know from you, which 3 books have had the most impact in your life and why?
Well, I'll start maybe with those from the investment industry. I think Roger Lowenstein's When Genius Failed and Liar's Poker, because that helps you with your combination of being very skilled but making sure you remain humble and the ethical orientation. I read a lot of biographies, and I think Benjamin Franklin was a Renaissance person, and I think keeping a wide open mind and a curious mind throughout your whole life will serve everybody well. It has made all the difference for me.
Great. And she mentioned about when genius failed. I would like to add one point that the guys who started that hedge fund were Nobel Prize winners, and they went bankrupt. So I think the takeaway would be, even when genius can fail, who are we? So when you are in the markets or anywhere else, be humble, because anything can go wrong anytime.
This is true. This is true.
One thing I'm curious, that how do you spend your typical day? Like, what's the day in your life from morning till night? Like, what's your daily routine?
So my routine is incredibly varied. I get up reasonably early in the morning, and I try and spend a few minutes quietly, and then I get onto email, make sure I kind of take care of the operations stuff. But this last 2 weeks are kind of typical. It's meeting with employers, it's meeting with my team to make sure our operations are running well. I often have interactions with our board members to make sure that our strategy is on course. I meet with candidates and members and regulators and those in the industry. So there's equal measure of operations, of meetings, and then hopefully I get a bit of time to just sort of settle down and reflect on the impressions that I have over the course of that, to see what signal is emerging that we need to be paying attention to. I have the great privilege of meeting with a wide variety of people who have expertise, who have different perspectives, and I find at this particular juncture, and probably not any different than you based on our conversation before we began this interview, is the ability to meet with a lot of people and pick up sort of what they're seeing. I think creates a much better picture for me of what CFA Institute can and needs to do.
Thank you, Marg, for all the insightful answers. And one thing which, when I look at you, as they say, a leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And you have done that for us and for all the investment professionals around here. So I've asked you a lot of professional questions. Now let's move on to the rapid fire round, and we would like to know that side of you as well. Read a book or watch a movie?
Watch a movie these days.
If you could have an unlimited supply of one thing, what would it be?
More time with my children.
Oh, that's a great answer. Your favorite vacation destination place?
Bahamas.
Oh, I'm sad you didn't say India.
India.
If your life was a movie, what would it be titled, and who would play the lead role?
What would be the title? The Misadventures of Marg Franklin. And my brothers are actually in the movie business, and they've always said Sandra Bullock.
Oh, that's great. You have been an inspiration for many investment professionals around the world, but anyone who inspires you the most?
Yes, and it's actually somebody who I met on our board, and it's Roger Irwin. And he has deep thinking. It is always oriented for the ultimate benefit of society, and he has inspired me to think differently and in a much more systems way. And so that's one person. And then the second person is Patty Dunn. And she was the chief executive of Barclays Global Investors. She started out as a secretary, made her way up to become the chief executive. And she had incredible courage. In fact, her desire to democratize professional investment management for everybody was the genesis of iShares.
Great. Yesterday you mentioned that you like North Indian food. So one question on that, pizza or North Indian food?
Oh, North Indian food.
Great. I think you're not compensating for not answering India.
Nope, North Indian food for sure.
So thank you, Marg. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I'm sure the audience would be find this insightful and they'll have many takeaways. So thank you for your time.
You are really good. And I was thinking as we were speaking, why is that? So number one, you make the person feel really comfortable. You are engaging. And so when I think about that, that's sort of curiosity, you've done your homework, so the conscientiousness, and then it's clear you love the business, so you're able to connect these things to what we're doing. So no doubt you'll be really successful.
Thank you so much.
So I love this. This is great, and I love doing it with people who are, newer to the industry. So
thank
it's
you
just
so
been
much.
wonderful.
It means a lot coming from you.
It's great.